My father was born in La Cavada, that's L-A, and then space C-A-V-A-D-A, Spain. This is in the mountains, and it's in a part of Spain where there's very little good agriculture. So what they did have were animals, and so he knew a little bit about animals. He was born in a house which, of course, had no electricity, no running water. It was pretty awful when I went to see it, which was when I was 10 years old. Uh, he did not learn how to read or write because he never went to school. And he got to the age of about 16. His father had died, and his mother married a man who was a very flamboyant man who was from the state of Galicia in Spain, which is where all the flamenco dancers and all those type of people come from that have a lot of talent, but are not known for being industrious in terms of actual labor, hand labor. So she married him, and he would not do any work, and so he was making my father, who was 6 years old at the time, do some pretty heavy labor, which he was attempting to do, but he would always yell at him, and it was quite difficult. So by the time my father got to be about 15, my grandmother said to my father, she reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a little handful of change and said, "Take this money and go away and make yourself a better life, because if you don't go, one of you will kill the other," meaning the stepfather or him, because she could see that the temperature was rising between the two of them. So he took the money, and he went to the port of Santander, which is in that province, and found that there was a boat that was going to Cuba, and that he could get a job there on the boat as a cabin boy. And so he got on that ship and he went to Cuba. When he got to Cuba, he got off the boat because he did not like being on the ocean, and found a job with a lady, a very wealthy lady in Cuba, who owned a big mansion, and he was supposedly a houseboy. So he was told to do various things, including climbing up on high ladders to clean her big paintings that she had, lots of apparently very expensive and nice oil paintings. So she would tell him to get up there and do that, and then she would not be happy with the job he was doing, so she would say, "Get down," and then she would get on the ladder, and she would say, "This is how you do it," and he would look up, and then she would say, "You're looking up my skirts." And so he felt that he couldn't win in that situation whatsoever, and so he decided that he'd try to just save as much as he could and go to find another life. And so when he had enough change that he could go across the bay to the ocean or whatever, to Cuba, from Cuba to the United States, he got to the United States, and then he worked his way from Florida all the way to Bakersfield, California, because he knew that there were sheep herders in Bakersfield, California, and he knew that in Bakersfield he would find a job that he would like and that he could excel at. So he finally got to Bakersfield, got to all the Basque restaurants and hotels that existed at that time in Bakersfield, and there went until he found a job, and someone hired him, and so they sent him up the mountain with a couple of dogs to herd the sheep and some provisions, and he would come down once a year so that he could get his paycheck, get his hair cut, go to the Spanish Basque bars, visit with his friends there, and then he would go back up for another year after the next day. And so this is what he did for approximately 7 to 10 years. I'm not exactly sure, and saved enough money to buy partnerships into a band of sheep so he could have his own sheep. And so at that point, he and another Basque, Spanish Basque friend, bought some sheep together, and they decided that they would take them away from that cold area to a more mild temperature because they wanted to have ewes with lambs, and the lambing season would be tough in the cold weather. So they brought the lambs down to some area, I guess near Riverside, out in an area which was now, of course, all houses and cement and shopping centers. But in those days was a very a deserty area with a lot of plants that the sheep could eat, and then some other things that close by that they could feed on. So it turns out that he then learned that there was this wonderful valley called Imperial Valley, which was just opening, and where there were all kinds of people coming in from all parts of the world, settling various parts of this county, because the land was cheap, and it was, of course, in those days pretty rough, and so they would have to till it, and they would have to fix it up. And so he decided to come down to Imperial Valley, and so in Imperial Valley he met my mother's family, because they're French. She was French Basque, and also her Spanish Basque. Her father was from France. Her mother was Spanish. So the two, they had the same mix, more or less, except my father was strictly Spanish. So they got together, and eventually, of course, they got married. But in those days, the valley was quite different, and there were all kinds of people there from various nationalities who had learned about the cheap land to try to settle it. And so there were Swiss people who settled in the Holtville area and had their cattle, their sheep, their dairy cattle, more or less, and a lot of sheepmen came from the Basque Country and had their sheep. And then there were the people in the Filipinos and people like that settled up in Nyland, and then several Japanese people down in Westmoreland and around Nyland and Brawley area. And so there was this great melting pot of people who were just full of tradition from the old country. And so we would have these wonderful picnics where everybody would come, and there would be dancing and singing, and everybody would be in their tradition, and it was a very wonderful life. At least for me, it was when I was growing up. But anyway, that's how he came to Imperial Valley.